Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talk Nerdy. Today is Monday, August 19th, 2019. I'm the host of the show, Cara Santamaria, and this week I want to thank the top patrons who have supported the show, including a new patron, Dudus Infinitus. Love the name. Also, Phil T. Bear, David J.E. Smith, Zombie Drummer, of course, Brian Holden, and last but definitely not least, Jeffrey Sewell. If you want to support the show, all you've got to do is go to patreon.com/talknerdy, and you can pledge your support right there. You can also visit shoptalknerdy.com, and you'll see all of the cool stuff I have available in my online store. All right, guys. This week, I've got a really special episode for you. I had the opportunity to sit down with John Urschel. Now, if you don't know, like if that name is not ringing a bell for you, I bet you do know who he is. Maybe you just don't know him by name. He's a retired American football guard and center. He played for the Baltimore Ravens. And he's also a mathematician who is currently working on his PhD in mathematics at MIT. Fascinating chat. You're going to learn an awful lot. I know I did. So without any further ado, here he is, John Urschel. Well, John, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So you are right now, are you living near MIT because you're actively working on your PhD?
Yes, I used to live right in Cambridgeport, but now I live in Somerville.
Oh, nice. I have a friend who lives in Somerville. Very cool.
Well, okay. So then I'll temper what I'm going to say, but I have to say I really liked Cambridgeport, but you can't really get a lot of space.
Yeah.
And so I moved out to Somerville, like in the interest of more space. Although I have to say, like the sort of like the flavor of the neighborhood, it's not quite the same. But
it's a bit different. But you've been all over because you've had such an interesting career. Like you're Canadian, right? You grew up in Canada?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I'll say I grew up in Canada. I think I'm allowed to claim that. I was born in Canada. I spent a lot of my summers in Canada, but I went to high school in Buffalo.
Gotcha. So you were in Manitoba, right?
I was born in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and I spent some years there. But and I have family nearby. But I spent most of my summers either in Calgary or in like Niagara, the Niagara region.
Oh, gotcha. And then you went to school in Buffalo. So basically, you are very adapted to the cold weather, is what you're telling me.
Yeah, I'm a Northeasterner. I'm gonna level with you.
I can't do it, man. I'm a Texan living in LA now. It's too cold for me. I don't know how you do it.
See, LA, everyone always tells me when they live in LA, they just like time just like it just passes. It just like flows like a river. You don't even notice because there's no seasons.
Yep. Well, we have something called June gloom. We always know when it's June because it's overcast and gross outside. But that's about it.
Gotcha. So that's how you know it's like it's a new year because the June gloom is back. I see.
Exactly. So was it much different for you then? So, okay, you went to college at Penn State. Were you drafted? Yes. I'm really interested to know how the whole like NFL draft thing works. You're supposed to have been graduated before you start your NFL career, right? That's just like a given? Or do most people?
No, definitely not. That's definitely not a given.
So are people drafted out of college and then they just like drop out?
Yeah. That's actually it's quite common.
Oh, that's a bummer. Does that is it something obviously that a lot of people struggle with later? Because football careers, from what I gather, are often quite short.
Yes. I believe I think the median is like 3 years or less or something like this.
Wow.
And it's a real issue. People not getting their degrees. Mm-hmm. And then, entering the draft and not making a team or only making a team for about a year or 2 years. The money for the majority of NFL players is not quite as good as you think. I mean, of course, it's nice, but not nice enough to make you not want to get your college degree, I would say.
Yeah, like most of us, I think when we think of somebody who plays American football, we think of, like a quarterback or, somebody who is like
Hmm.
a star player. And we're like, oh, but they make many millions a year. But I think it's just like in the film industry where people don't realize that the three principals in a movie are making millions and millions. And literally every other actor is making, scale.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like I remember I don't mind talking about money. My salary my rookie year
Mm.
was $420,000, I think.
Yeah, which
And
I'm
yes,
sure fresh out
I
of college is
recognize,
like, oh my gosh, that's amazing.
yeah, people would say like, oh, this is a lot of money. But is like $420,000 for your first year enough money to make you say, well, I'm not going to finish my college degree? I'm not sure that's sort of the way to go. Although in some
Especially,
instances, I have to say, I do agree with it going out before they finish their degree. Like, for instance, if they're telling you you're going to be drafted in the first 20 picks and you're going to make, let's say, millions of dollars,
mhm,
you should probably just, not finish your degree, go get your millions of dollars and come back for your degree later.
totally.
Because if you stay another year and finish your degree, well, maybe your knee gets blown out, maybe something bad happens, and you're missing out on a lot of money. So those sorts of situations I understand.
Yeah, which makes sense. And even $400,000, obviously, to a kid who came from a place that was kind of rough, who's maybe, really busting ass in school to get through, and this could really help their family. This could really help them. If you're good with money and if you have a plan, but the problem is most of these kids who are starting in, you're even very young, but most kids when they're starting out are kids, right? They're kids. Like you can't
Yeah,
expect them
no,
to
it's
have
true.
financial
Well,
literacy.
yeah, that's it's extremely hard to come by.
Yeah.
And I will say that the NFL Players Association and partnered with the NFL, they do try to do their part. They
Mm.
really try to help, but really there's only so much you can do, and it's not. I don't think it's like a football player issue. I think if you just take the general population of, let's say, like 21 to like 23-year-olds,
Mhm.
and you give any group of them just like $400,000 a year to start,
Yeah,
I think the majority of them are gonna they're gonna end up blowing a decent amount of it without even realizing.
absolutely. And then you add to that they have kind of the social currency of,
Yeah.
playing in the NFL and they're going to parties and they're needing to show their faces in order to kind of promote the work that they're doing and stuff. And like, you get excited and you might start to buy some things that are kind of flashy. And there's no judgment. Like
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
you should be able to enjoy your life, but the problem is it's the foresight, right? Like you actually had a lengthy career, or a fulfilling career, and you played for how many seasons?
I played for 3 seasons.
Yeah, that was your NFL career.
Yeah.
It's so amazing. I'm looking at some write-ups of you. You retired at 26 years old.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think so. I think I'm 28 now.
You think?
28.
wait,
No, but
wait. You're a mathematician. You should be able to calculate that.
here's my question for you.
Yes.
Do you always remember what age you are?
No, never.
Just level with me.
Never
If you
ever.
do, tell me.
No, and it's funny. I always use my mom as my marker because I'm
Hmm.
35, and my mom had me when she was 35. So it's really easy. She's exactly 35 years
Oh,
older
I
than me.
see.
So I weirdly remember my mom's age, and then I
Hmm.
always subtract 35 from it to calculate mine, which is not the easiest thing to do.
Yeah, no, but I don't know. I don't think this is just a me thing. Like, I feel like once I got past 25, I just started forgetting about it.
Yeah.
And then at some point I realized I was claiming I was 28 for like almost a full year before I was 28.
Oh, isn't that funny? Yeah, we round up beforehand so that when the birthday comes, it doesn't punch us in the throat as bad.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, we're like, oh, I've been this age this whole time. I always have
Yeah.
this conversation with my friends about like how weird life would be if you aged that entire year on your birthday, and you like just looked in the
Oh,
mirror and you saw a whole year of age. Like it would be perceptible then.
That would be so interesting. So now this brings me like to a funny point. So my dad is like, he's a little rough around the edges.
Okay.
And so some of the things he says are just absolutely hilarious. And I remember he was talking to me about like a friend of his who sort of like, his friend always gets depressed kind of sad on his birthday because he's getting older. And my dad sort of said this exact same thing. He was like, well, X person, it's not like you aged 1 year on this day. Like you've been getting older all year. So if you're going to be sad about getting older, you should be sad all year round.
Literally every minute of every day. Like, oh crap, I'm a minute
you should
older.
be sad just permanently because you're always getting older. He was like, I hate to break this to you. It's not just on your birthday.
It's so true. It's such an arbitrary thing. Oh man. That would suck though. I would not like that. That would be very
I don't know.
hard.
I feel like I would kind of enjoy like you only age on your birthday because okay, well, first of all, how does this work like when you're born is the question.
I know it's weird because we're 0 years old until we're 1 year old, which is also strange.
So are we like a newborn for a full year?
Yeah, actually, I think parents would love that. You have a kiddo, don't you?
Yeah, I have a kiddo. Are we sure that we would love that?
No, you're right. You would hate that because you love every single little milestone, don't you?
Yeah, the milestones are like, I'm telling you, this is like the best part, especially in the first year.
Yeah.
I'm telling you. Okay, especially the first 6 months. Every single day, it's something new.
Aww.
Every single day. Because like they're learning so much so quickly. Every single day, there's something like very substantial that is new.
Yeah.
I mean, now, so my little one, she's like a year and a half now.
Oh my gosh, that's such a good age. Is she like babble talking or can she talk?
No, she can like talk.
She can fully talk.
She can like talk to the extent we're actually like in the dangerous zone of talking where, okay, well, first of all, it's enjoyable. I teach her a lot of words. She learns things. For instance, she can count to 20 and she really enjoys it.
Wow.
But she knows enough words and has enough vocabulary that she can always tell us what she wants or what she doesn't want or that she disagrees. But she like doesn't have enough vocabulary where like she can claim that she doesn't understand us when we're trying to get her to do something or tell her something. Like she can feign like she doesn't understand. And, you know, if she's like 3, you can have a conversation with them and you know they understand you. Yeah. And so you can sort of, you can assume more, which allows you to be a little stricter. But, you know, she can just pretend like, no, I can't understand you. I don't know what you're saying.
And you're like, I know you do, but I don't know you do.
Exactly. Exactly.
Oh my gosh, that's so sweet. My favorite, I think, I have a lot of friends who have kids, right? Because I'm kind of at that age. And my favorite is when they're babbling. Just the crazy, like how they entertain themselves. They just talk to themselves for like hours straight, but none of the words mean anything. But they have all of the like vocal prosody, right? They have all the emotion in the voice.
Yeah.
And it's like they're little, but none of the words are real words. It's amazing to watch.
Oh yeah, no, they can just go like my daughter. She's out of that phase because, you know, she has a lot of like real words now. But she was doing that for a while.
It's so cool. Like little kids are just. It's fascinating to watch a brain develop, and just to see that it happens naturally. Like literally, all you have to do is make sure that the environment is really stimulating. Right? Talk to them a lot. Have lots of bright colors. You know, teach them everything you can. Like be as stimulating as possible, and they just do it on their own.
Yeah. No, it's really cool.
So cool. All right. So speaking of learning and speaking of numeracy, I mean, obviously a big part of why I was really excited to have you in the show, you know, I followed your work for a long time is, well, A, because I think you're just such an incredible role model. And I think that's so important in the sort of social climate that we're living in right now. But B, you know, Talk Nerdy has been for the past, I guess, 5 years I've been on the air now, really celebrating STEM almost every episode that I do, I'm interviewing a scientist or a science writer. And one thing that I've really felt bad about, one thing that I feel like we're really lacking on the show is I don't get as much. Lately, I've been doing a lot more in engineering, but I don't get as much into the M part of STEM, the mathematics part. I've had Steve Strogatz on the show. I've had a couple mathematicians. I have talked to a few people about math, but honestly, like if you compare the number of people I have on the show talking about theoretical astrophysics or talking about, conservation and biodiversity or all these other really fun topics, there's a poverty of math talk on my show. So I'm super excited to talk to you about math.
Wait, so I want to know, who is preceding me? Who are my great predecessors?
Okay, let's see.
So we have Steve. So first of all, Steve is my boy.
Isn't he the best?
I love Steve to death.
He's the best.
I'm actually going to be out in Ithaca in I think in a week.
Oh, awesome.
I'm going to be hanging out with him. So
that's so great.
Should be fun.
Let me see. So recently, I'll give you a little sampling of some recent episodes that I've done. So a few really great authors. Okay, I had Lucy Jones, who is a seismologist here in California at Caltech. She's probably the preeminent earthquake scientist. I had this wonderful woman recently on the show named Anna Humphrey, who literally just graduated college, or no, not college, high school. She just graduated high school. She won the Regeneron Science Talent Search and won some ungodly amount of money, like $250,000 to fund her collegiate scientific endeavors.
Oh, wow.
And it was amazing.
Gotcha. I was curious what age range she was in that made you
she's barely 18.
On the girl-woman threshold.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It was amazing. I had an incredible woman. I'm just scrolling through recently. I'm going to give you just a handful. Maxie Lewis, who is, I was recently in Namibia, and she is a Namibian woman who works at a conservancy, kind of interplaying between the indigenous population at the conservancy and some of the governmental needs. And so she kind of works to help maintain this really beautiful conservancy and help maintain the wildlife populations there. She was really, really fast. She was an anti-apartheid activist when she was a teenager. She was super fascinating to have on the show. Okay. So I've had a lot of.
What about my math?
Let me see, math. I don't have that many. I'm telling you, it's super depressing. So,
have you had? You've had Ellenberg on here.
No,
I would imagine.
No, Ellenberg. I honestly think it's just Steve. I'm so embarrassed. I've had so many physicists who have strong math backgrounds, but and now whoever's listening to the show is but what about me? I'm a mathematician. I'm like, shit, I'm forgetting you, aren't I? There's so many episodes. I'm trying to scroll through them all, and I'm like, not a mathematician, not a mathematician, not a mathematician. I'm telling you, this is so embarrassing. I think it's just Steve.
So just know that you did it right. Just know that you did it right. I think Jordan should come before I do, but I'm going to resist the urge to cut this podcast short and let you talk to Jordan, and I'll stay on the line. But I think Jordan is I think that would be a good trifecta, Steve, me, Jordan.
Okay, I'll reach out to Jordan. I will. I promise. So I'm super excited to talk about math, but I'm also, of course, excited the way that I think a lot of people who have probably interviewed you over the years are excited to talk about sort of your journey and the interplay of, it must be a little bit, well, I shouldn't say that. I can't speak for you. I don't know if it's frustrating at all.
No, speak for me. I want to hear what you want to say for me.
I'm wondering if it's at all frustrating that the common line is, oh my gosh, you're an NFL player and you're smart. How surprising. Does that bum you out?
Yeah. It's it's an interesting thing. I always go back and forth. I don't know how to take it. I really don't know how to take it. In one sense, I guess it's a good thing that this is being mentioned because, it's sort of showing people that, you can do multiple things. You can be good at multiple things. But it is a little, sometimes some of the interviews I have are a little bit, more gimmicky than others. Interviewers ask you questions. They like to read a paper you've written and they can't pronounce it. And there's so many words. Because I can't pronounce it, that must mean it's really, really difficult. And so this guy must be really, really smart. And he plays football. How crazy is that? That's the interview.
Yeah, that's annoying. Also, it's actually building a bigger kind of chasm between academia and the kind of voting public, which I think is a huge bummer, right? Like as a science communicator, I've been working for a decade. This is what I do for a living, trying to build bridges between academia and the voting public. And so it's such a bummer when I see interviews or coverage in the popular, STEM media that's like, we can't possibly understand the things that these really smart people who are up on a pedestal can understand. They're like of a different species than us. And it's like, no, that's not the message we want to send out. It's bad.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. Not only is it annoying, it's actually like, it's actively dangerous.
Right.
It actively like alienates people from, like, in my instance, alienates people from mathematics, because it sort of tells them that, like, hey, this person is like, he's just like crazy, but he's not like me, is the thing that sort of comes from that. I'm curious, you said voting public. I'm curious, do you have a specific focus in sort of conveying sort of like science that is somehow related to political policy? Is this like your
I think
focus?
As I've gotten a little bit older, that has interested me a little bit more. I think it's, I'm wondering why I actually said that's like a weird kind of Freudian slip there, because I don't do a lot of children's programming. I do some children's programming, but most of the work that I've done has been geared towards adults. And I think that scientific literacy, one of the core kind of reasons that I promote scientific literacy, and that I think that it's important that as a society we become more literate, is because it does have a civic influence. So, it's like if I were to argue why it's important that everybody at least know a little bit about science, it's because it's going to help them be better voters and help them make decisions that are better for the country.
That actually, so first of all, I have to say that completely makes sense. And it's fully because I'm coming from math that I haven't thought of that. Because coming from math, what I usually deal with is sort of trying to convince people why having a base knowledge of mathematics is really important for them, for their for their lives. And then sort of also arguing for sort of the importance of having, strong mathematicians and having a strong sort of, I don't know how to put it, but an education system in the United States, because mathematics is important for many of the sort of technologies that we rely on and many of the innovations that, we want to do. But I guess when I think of math, I don't usually think about an importance of sort of math literacy for civic duty, although that's something really interesting you could talk to Jordan about. Because, so are you familiar with his book, How Not to Be Wrong?
I've seen it. I haven't read it, but yeah, I've totally seen that book.
The main idea is like, okay, one of the like big things that he sort of, in my opinion, argues for is the idea that like mathematical literacy is really important because it helps you, one, understand statistics
and risk
better.
And oh my gosh, that's so important.
And yes. And two, like, well, I shouldn't even say two, really it's just understand statistics better. Like you hear a statistic, you understand what it's actually saying, and you don't go to conclusions that aren't immediately implied by the statistic. Two, you sort of have a better eye for statistics that could be flat out wrong. And three, you're more likely, you sort of become better at trying to recognize when there might be confounding variables that haven't really been considered. And I think that's important. And that probably, in my opinion, ties back a lot to sort of the civic duty.
Yeah, I think there's a ton of crossover there. Like a lot of the work that I do is in the quote unquote skeptic community. And their fundamental kind of, mission, I guess if you could say, if the skeptic community had a mission, is just to basically, I think it's fundamentally tied to like an understanding of the scientific method and of evidence-based thinking and being able to make basically not getting taken advantage of by people who know how to use statistics to make you think something that is not reflected in the data. So like, marketers, like basically social psychology, that's the big thing. Social psychology is such a a brilliant field and people can use it to their advantage. Like hucksters, charlatans, marketers can use it to their advantage to take what they want from you. And if you're not armed with that, you're going to make a lot of bad decisions in your life.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's actually, I mean, it's scary.
But so the work
scary.
that you do in math. So wait, I would love to know, by the way, and this is totally like, yes, listeners to Talk Nerdy, you can listen in on this chat. Sorry, I'm going to get a little personal right now, but I'm finishing up the second year of my PhD right now.
In what?
In clinical psychology. So I did neuroscience for years. I was a working neuroscientist. Then I got into science communication full time. So I went back to school after 10 years to go back and finish my PhD and switched degrees. So kind of started from scratch. So clinical psychology over here. You are studying. Are you pure math or are you applied math?
I'll call myself applied math, but I'm not sure applied math always likes to claim me.
Interesting. Okay. So what year are you in your degree?
So I started like sort of partway through a year at some point. So I guess technically I'm a fourth year.
Oh my gosh. I'm so jealous.
Wait, why?
Because like that means that you've taken all of your classes and you're working on your dissertation, right?
Yes, this is true.
Because I still have coursework left to do and I'm like so over it.
I mean, so here's the thing. Here's what I've realized about the PhD is that you always think like the easiest part is the part you haven't done yet.
You're so right.
I'm going to like straight up level with you. Like I got into the PhD program and I'm like, you know what, John? First, you just got to take these classes. And then once you take these classes, like the hardest part is done. And then I've gotten through a decent amount of classes. And then I say, you know what, John, you just have to pass this qualifying exam. And then the hardest part's done. So then you pass the qualifying exam. And then you're like trying to figure out what your thesis is. You're reading papers. You have to do your thesis proposal. And then it's like, okay, I know what I'm doing my thesis on. I've like looked at all the relevant research. The hardest part is done. Like now I just gotta, and now
you just gotta write the damn thing.
Yeah, here I am sort of sitting here and now it's like, oh, I need to come up with a thesis. I need to like do the things that I said I was going to do. Yeah. We go back to all those other easy parts.
The parts where there was like a syllabus and the professor just told me what I needed to do.
Yes, exactly.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Okay, so point taken, very important. So you're a PhD candidate then?
Yes, I am.
That's amazing. You're not a PhD student anymore. You're a PhD candidate. That's a big deal. Yeah, I don't think a lot of people who, didn't, who were smart and who shied away from the graduate education, they don't maybe know that there's like these different kind of stages and different titles you're allowed to call yourself based on how far you've hacked your way through the degree. So I'm still a PhD student. I passed part 1 of my quals this semester, and then part 2 of my quals come in at the end of my 3rd year. And then once I finish that, I've done all of my clinical hours because I see patients as part of a clinical psych degree, and have gotten my dissertation proposal approved. Then I get to be called a PhD candidate. So it's going to be at least another year and a half until I'm a candidate. I've always wondered why certain schools some schools call it a dissertation and some schools call it a thesis.
I didn't. First of all, I don't know a place. Okay, now I don't even know. I always just thought they were sort of synonymous.
I think they are synonymous, but it's really funny. Like living in LA, the vast majority of my very, very close friends here, because I've been in science circles for a long time, are Caltech grads. And at Caltech, they also call it a thesis. So at MIT, they call it a thesis. At Caltech, they call it a thesis. I'm going to a psych-only school. They call it a dissertation. I'm pretty sure that at some of the California state schools like USC or UCLA, they call it a dissertation. And now I'm wondering if thesis is just like a snobbier word for dissertation.
Really interesting. I always thought dissertation was the fancy word.
Hilarious. But I feel like the uber top tier competitive schools, they always call it a thesis.
I see. Interesting. This is good to know.
Very strange, right? Of course,
Yeah,
my
I don't know.
N
When I hear
is 2, so that might not be the best way to
no,
determine this.
seems like sufficient sample size. Your p-value is going to be quite small. I think this is good statistics.
For sure. I'm just going to run a power analysis on that really quickly.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, okay, you are a fourth year. You have, since you're a PhD candidate, you've gotten your proposal approved. So do we get to know what your thesis is going to be about, what you're doing for it?
You know what? I mean, I might as well. I generally stay quiet about it, but sure. So my thesis is going to be it's intimately related to a field called quantization.
Okay.
And what this is this is something that sort of grew out of a bigger field called information theory. So this is like this guy, Claude Shannon, and some other people. They were asking fundamental questions about your ability to, let's say, convey information to another person through a channel that might have some noise, your ability to, say, tell someone a piece of information using a limited number of bits or using, like a limited number of, numbers of certain length. And it's sort of a big, wide field. And, I'm not really going to try to describe my specific area too much.
Okay.
But it really is related to the concept of you have some amount of information and you're trying to compress it in some way.
Okay. And so when I hear the word like you said quantization?
Yes, quantization.
So quanta would be, I'm assuming, like a given parameter, like you're trying to bucket the information into small packets?
Oh, wow.
Is that wrong?
it seems like you know more about my research area than I do.
I just feel like that's what the word quanta would mean. I don't know.
No, so I'm going to level with you. I'm going to level with you and all your listeners. You definitely know way more about this research area than me, because I didn't even know, like, where does the term quantization come from? Like, really, that's exactly what you should think of. You should think of, like, imagine you have some function and you're just like breaking the function into pieces and like putting them into like different buckets. Yeah. It's like, if you have a function, let's say on the unit interval 0, 1, you just break 0, 1 into a bunch of like pieces, like maybe like you break it into 20 pieces.
Okay.
You want to break it into 20 pieces in such a way that you get like the best approximation possible in some sense.
Interesting. So now's the part where you have completely lost me, because although I understand that kind of cognitively, or maybe I should say theoretically, how the hell can you break 0, 1 down into 20 pieces?
Oh, sorry. This is the mathematician in me. When I say 0, 1, I mean the unit interval.
I don't even know what a unit interval is. I'm so lost. I love this.
Oh, no. Okay. No, this is totally my fault. This is totally
it's not.
my fault.
It's I'm so fascinated.
No. We're going to talk about this. So just imagine, like the real line, it's just like all the numbers.
Yes, the number line.
From like negative infinity to infinity.
Yeah, for sure.
When I say like the unit interval, I just mean like all the points between 0 and 1.
Oh, yeah, you're right. There's a lot of stuff in there, isn't there?
There's like a ton of stuff in there. There's actually infinitely many. I don't even know if you should say like infinitely many stuff or infinitely much stuff, but like there's a lot of stuff.
Oh gosh. So this is really cool, because I feel like when you start to get deep into mathematic theory, I guess you could say, like you're talking about the practical functions in math, you're talking about how they can apply to real world stuff, but you're also kind of diving into, like, maybe, I don't even know if this is a good way to put it, but like a philosophy of math. Like the foundational stuff that is almost linguistic in a way.
Yeah, I will say that. Yeah, there are a lot of sort of fundamental questions related to this field, and this is what I like about it, is that it's at the same time sort of very applied in many ways, because this is quite useful for a lot of things like machine learning and different settings. But there's also a lot of sort of theoretical questions about you have you have like a square, or you have a square in like n dimensions. What's the best way to break the square up to minimize something in some sense? And it's something sort of, it's a very fundamental type of question. And I have to say, like, that's part of what really attracted me to this area.
It's really cool too, because you can almost kind of intuitively see how it would be related to so many other fields, like how it would be related to cosmology, for example, like understanding how you would break up a square, or maybe I should say a sphere, right? Because that's a more conserved shape that we see in the universe, into these fundamental pieces and stuff. Help us understand how celestial bodies form. Like, it's amazing to think of all the different ways across sort of the experiential spectrum that mathematics informs everything else.
Yeah, and one of my favorite things about math is that, oftentimes, well, yeah, most of the time when you're sort of a mathematics researcher, you're studying this area, and you're studying this because you love it and because there's something very beautiful about it. And you often aren't even aware of the applications that are going to come from what you do until after you've done
that's
it.
cool. Like, it probably even surprises you're like, whoa, you did what with the what? Like, that's really
Yeah,
cool.
exactly.
Yeah, people say that a
Yeah.
lot about when they're, trying to maybe justify, I don't know if justify is the right word, but to talk about why it's so important that we do, first of all, basic research, and, not always just everything should be applied research. And also certain things like, why is it important to go to Mars and study, the geology of Mars, for example. And it's like, because so much other science, math, and technology actually comes out of trying to answer really big questions that we can't even predict.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely agree. I mean, okay, the math example, like I always think of is, if you look back, let's say 100 years, and you talk about, number theory. So this is an area of math where you're really concerned with just properties of numbers. And one of the most fascinating things that they're concerned with is sort of things related to prime numbers.
Okay.
And who would have thought how related number theory would be to modern cryptography?
Oh, shit. Yeah. Why would you ever think
And
that?
that modern encryption, like a lot of encryption is really dependent on sort of mathematical ideas from number theory.
I mean, it's amazing. And you're right. There's just, how could you possibly have foreseen that? Because it requires technological advances that, would not even...
That you aren't even aware of. Like, who 100 years ago would have thought, wow, we're really going to need prime numbers so that we can send bits of information to each other through like these, through like something called the internet. And we need to make sure it's secure so someone can't steal like our digital money. Like, imagine 100 years ago, like, you tell someone this is why number theory is important.
Oh yeah, they'd be like in an institution. It would be like, that's not a thing. He's delusional.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I think I remember having that kind of realization when I was watching the Hedy Lamarr documentary Bombshell, and they talked all about the frequency hopping patent that she wrote, and how she brought it to the government for like wartime. I guess maybe that's not really considered cryptography, but communications. But it really informed like modern radio. And like, there's just so many technologies that came from this thing that like had one application and can actually inform so many other things now.
Yeah, no, I don't know. It's just, it's always interesting to me.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so what is the actual research question that you're working on for your thesis, or is it going to be so esoteric we won't understand it?
I think it's best. I think it's best we don't go down that rabbit
hole. That's fair. But once you publish.
But once I publish, I mean, listen. If you want a copy of my thesis, just know.
Sweet.
I will send one.
Do you, in math, is it like in physics where you publish on an archive first? Is that common?
Yeah, that's extremely common.
Okay,
Yeah,
interesting.
archive is extremely common in math.
That's cool. So that you're able to see kind of new information as quick as it's being pushed out. Like, because peer review is so slow.
Well, it depends on what you're used
Mm.
to. So in math, I mean, okay, usual peer review, you'll get a paper back in 6 months. And in some fields, they're like 6 months. Oh my Lord, that's so slow. I mean, 6 months isn't that slow, but also I like the archive system because it allows you to put something up before it's gone through peer review, before maybe it's like fully clean in its final version, and you allow other people to see the ideas that you've been thinking of and the new techniques you've come up with. And it allows for sort of a more rapid sort of development of ideas and techniques, because you don't have to like constantly wait 6 months to see the next breakthrough.
It's so true. And it also, it's in many ways, it is a better democratization of ideas, because not only is it iterating because you're getting that immediate feedback, but you're also sharing your information with others that's then helping them iterate.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a lot of people don't like sort of the current mathematical system of journals and the peer review system. I think the peer review system as it is sort of very necessary, but I love the archive system.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think if we didn't have peer review, obviously there would be a bigger kind of scientific crisis than we even, like reproducibility crisis, than we even have now. But it's in some ways a little bit broken, because it's like, it's all about paywalls. It's all about kind of nepotism and like who's on the editorial board. And like, yeah, there are definitely things that I think we could fix about it. And so you're right, the archive kind of democratizes it, but it may not have the same checks and balances that are kind of necessary.
Yeah, exactly. Not to say that the checks and balances that you sort of see in classical peer review is perfectly good either, because listen, you'd be surprised how many math papers I've gone through that have been published in a journal, have been peer reviewed, have been cited, like, cited many times, where the main result is just wrong.
Oh yeah. That's why I love Ivan Oransky's Retraction Watch.
Oh, I don't know this.
Oh my gosh, it's the best publication. So I subscribe to it on, like, I have an RSS reader where I subscribe to like science news all the time, right? Because a lot of what I do is public communication of science, so I need to know what's going on in the world of science. And Ivan's publication, Retraction Watch, basically just details all of the retractions, all of the malfeasance, everything that's going on within kind of academic publishing. And because, as we know, right, a retraction doesn't get nearly as much
attention
traction.
as a publication.
Yeah, exactly, as the original publication. And Andrew Wakefield and the anti-vax movement is such a perfect example of that. Like, that was fraud. Like, he published legit fraudulent papers about the MMR vaccine, and they still have more traction now within the anti-vax movement than all of the legitimate science that's come out before then, showing that there's no link between vaccination and autism. And for whatever reason, it still rings true. It's so frustrating, but that's psychology. And so Ivan has kind of worked really, really hard with his team to help keep people informed of where there's malfeasance and where there's, just legitimate difficulty with peer review. Like, a paper is retracted because, for purely kind of what's the word? Like, intentional reasons, there was a problem with the data analysis, or there was, whatever the case may be, or it couldn't be replicated, and they finally figured out why, so they retracted the article. So it's nice to be able to see that, but it is a bummer that more people don't actually read it or keep an eye on it.
Yeah, although I guess it's interesting, because in math, sort of retractions, okay, they're upsetting to the author to have to do, but it's almost never on purpose. It's pretty much never on purpose. Like in math, like sometimes, you're working on very complicated things and you say 2 + 2 is 5, and then your whole result is wrong because you thought 2 + 2 is 5. And
so it's a mistake.
Yeah, it's just a mistake. Like, it's not like trying to like falsify anything. It's, you legitimately make a logical mistake.
Yeah.
And then it just like everything comes crumbling down. I mean, that's how it happens in math. And so that's why, like, okay, my advisor really like stresses to me the importance of, when you write a paper, check every single thing and make sure every single thing is right. And you really need to go through it again and again to avoid those types of mistakes.
And do you have sort of like colleagues and confidants who you feel like you can, because I know a lot of times in science or I should say STEM, because in engineering and mathematics, this is probably even extra important. You're trying to do something first or better or in a more parsimonious way. And so you want to publish and be the person who did that, right? So like, you're not just going to share everything every step of the way, but do you have confidants who you feel like can look over your work so that it doesn't all, you've got a second pair of eyes. That's important.
Yeah, that's not always the case. I mean, for me, oftentimes, I just need to check it myself again and again. And, I'll check it myself and then I'll wait a few days.
Yeah.
So that I can try to forget everything and then try to look at it like it's brand new.
All right, guys, let's get back to the show. Interesting. That is really important. I mean, writers say the same thing, right? Sometimes you just have to put it down and you have to go do something completely different. Go on a hike, go watch a sappy romantic movie, do something that takes your brain in a completely different place, because that's when the epiphanies and that's when the calculating it a different way, looking at it outside of the box, that's when that stuff comes in. But when you're in it, sometimes you can't get out of it.
Yeah, no, definitely. Definitely.
Oh,
by the way, favorite sappy romantic movie? Go.
Me? Oh gosh, favorite sappy. Well, I just recently watched A Star Is Born on the airplane on the way to vacation, and I ugly cried, and the flight attendant asked me if I was okay.
It was that powerful?
It was the second worst plane ugly cry. The first worst, and you've well, I don't want to say you've probably seen this, but you may have seen this, was Steve Gleason's documentary. You have to. So basically, for people who are listening, I think I've mentioned Steve on the show before. So he was, he played for the Saints. He is a brilliant, really funny, really sweet guy. I've never met him in real life, but we follow each other on Twitter and like sometimes exchange a lot. We'll like DM each other and stuff. He's super funny. He's like kind of big, like he's like a skeptic, I think. He's definitely like a science enthusiast. And he was diagnosed with ALS. And he found out he was diagnosed with ALS kind of right at the same time that he found out that he and his wife were having a baby. And so the documentary follows sort of the pregnancy and the first couple of years as his motor function is declining, because he knows that once his kid is old enough to understand, he'll be locked in. And so it's a really touching, really moving, really beautiful documentary, but it's also really warm and really, really funny. He's just like a legitimately funny guy. And so I remember I watched that on a plane and I messaged him on Twitter right after. And I was like, thanks for making me cry like a freaking idiot on the plane. He's like, oh yeah, happy to help. But yeah, that was an ugly cry too. But I wouldn't consider that a sappy romantic movie because it was a doc. What about you? What's your favorite sappy romantic movie?
Before Sunrise.
Oh, that one's really good.
Yeah. Before
that
Sunrise.
Whole series is really good.
Yeah. Before Sunrise in particular is my favorite of the three, I'd say.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that movie in a really long time. Did you see A Star Is Born?
No, I haven't.
You should totally see it.
Yeah, so I have to let you know, like, I'm usually very behind on like new movies and pop culture and things like this.
I kind of am too. I think it's part of being like stuck in academia, but because of my job, I travel a lot. So the only time I really catch up is on airplanes. Gotcha.
Yeah, because A Star Is Born, that recently came out, right? That's a new movie.
Yeah, like a year, I think, at this point.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, it's new-ish, but Hollywood pumps them out fast now. Like stuff's old within a few months. It's pretty rough. You could totally watch it, I think, on like iTunes now, just like in the comfort of your home.
Okay,
yeah.
So you think it's worth checking out?
Oh, for sure. Especially like, watch it with the wifey. Is she the wifey?
Yeah.
Yeah, watch it with the wifey. She might have already seen it, though. You should ask.
Yeah, okay. I should check. Yeah.
Speaking of the wifey, she co-wrote your new book with you, didn't she?
Yeah. So she's like a historical nonfiction author. And she also writes for The New Yorker. And it just really, it really made sense that, we were thinking about it. And, Louisa was sort of displeased with like the other like prospects of people I could possibly do it with. And just thought, you know what? let's just do this together. And she sort of was in between books, so she really wanted to. And
I love that. You know, the last person I interviewed on the show, as of our interview today, there will be a few in between when this airs, was Annika Harris. And Annika just recently wrote a book about consciousness, and she has been a kind of consultant and science writer for years, co-writing with a lot of scientists. And that's how she met her husband, Sam Harris. And they've written stuff together. So Sam, is a very popular neuroscience writer and big kind of in the atheist movement. But it's really cool, I think, when that happens, where like you've got a subject matter expert and a writer. That also is very similar to my friend who I've had on the show, Sean Carroll, and Jen Ouellette. So she's a popular science writer, and he is a Caltech physicist.
Yeah, so I know Sean Carroll. I don't know his wife.
Oh, Jen Ouellette has written the best. Oh, she wrote a really great book called The Calculus Diaries. I think you'd like it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I recognize the name of the book. I just didn't remember the author. Okay.
Yeah, she's great. She's written a lot of really cool science books. I'm looking at my math shelf. I have a math shelf. Oh, I had another mathematician on recently, Hannah Fry.
Oh, Hannah. So Hannah, I've never met Hannah, but we always go on the same things. We're always like in the same circles, but I've never met this woman in my life.
That's so funny. And I'm seeing another one. Art Benjamin, the mathematician.
Oh, gotcha.
Do you know him? He's interesting.
Oh, wow. The pause has gone on too long that now, now it's embarrassing. My final answer is going to be, no, I have not met this person.
Okay.
No, I've been on podcasts where I've done it to myself, where I've been like, I have this friend and I say all these things and they'll be like, what's his name? And like, I will blank on someone's name, or someone will ask me like, oh, do you know such and such?
And you're like, dude, don't ask me that.
And I'm like, are you really going to ask me that live on a podcast? Air. You're not going to cut this. And I've probably met this person like 5 times. They're going to listen to it. It's their favorite podcast.
Of course.
And then they're going to hear all about how clearly they were not very memorable to me. So Art Benjamin can rest easy. We've never met.
You've never met. He's interesting. He's at Harvey Mudd here in California, and he does, he calls himself the mathematician, and he does feats of calculation, but they're all things that anybody can learn. It's like shortcuts to calculate large numbers and things like that. And it's pretty interesting.
So he's like part of the, who's that guy who wrote that like magic math book?
That might be him.
Is it?
Yeah, he wrote a book called The Magic of Math.
I think the person I'm thinking of is like a British guy.
Oh, interesting. There might be two.
Or like a mental math book, something.
Yeah, there might be an equal and opposite counterpart, like a bizarro version in the UK. Or in a parallel universe.
I feel like there is one in the parallel universe that is like the UK.
I love that. Yeah.
I think there is.
I'm like, this is a fun game where we list all the people we know who do math.
Exactly.
I'm friends with Danica McKellar. She hasn't made it to the podcast yet, but it's really cool that Winnie Cooper from the Wonder Years is also really big into math.
How is she your friend and she's just like, she's ghosting you? What's going on here?
I think she's just really busy because she does a lot of really like awesome Hallmark movies now.
Wait, really? I must be slacking on my Hallmark movies because I used to like really love watching Hallmark movies. This used to be like one of my favorite things.
Oh yeah, you'll see Danica McKellar in like a lot of them recently. It's kind of cool.
Okay, I've been like slacking on my.
You got to catch up on your Hallmark movies. Oh, I love it. So, but I really love that you and your wife got to co-write. So your new book is Mind and Matter, A Life in Math and Football. So you are, you talk about math, you talk about your experience in the NFL, probably a lot of the questions that people want to know about when they interview you, like on shows like this. And because she is a professional writer and a professional nonfiction, like you said, nonfiction historian, what a perfect partner. And she's also your life partner.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, I love that. But was that like an awkward thing being like she had to interview you to write this, right? Like there had to be a lot of deep conversations about writing about your life.
So surprisingly not, because she really knows everything about me. And so so much of the way we split it up was I was really responsible for the math, and she was responsible for the narrative. And she pretty much knew all the narrative stuff to start. So,
because you covered all that when you were dating.
Yeah, exactly. And, through friends, and, we're at parties and weddings, and we're telling old stories and things of that sort.
Okay, so there's a few more things that I really want to know from you, and we're running low on time. So I'm going to try and quick ask a couple of things, because we haven't even gotten yet to the conversation about CTE. And I've read in a lot of articles and a lot of coverage that this is something that matters to you. Obviously, my background, my master's is neuroscience. I'm working on my PhD in clinical psychology. CTE and just traumatic brain injury in general, but CTE specifically has always been really fascinating to me. I've read a lot about, the Boston Brain Bank and just the difficulty learning about how early, how young some of this stuff occurs, about kind of concussive syndrome. I guess you could say like low-level concussions that are repetitive, and how you can see CTE damage even when you don't see a lot of active concussive damage. And also, I mean, you have a little girl, which unfortunately we have, some gender issues in this country. So I feel like this question doesn't apply as much, which bums me out. So I'm going to turn it on his ear and say, when your little girl gets older,
it doesn't bum me out.
Yeah, exactly.
If where you're going, it doesn't bum me out that much.
Yeah, but so let's turn it on its ear and say, yeah, if your little girl gets older and says, I want to play football, how will you grapple with that?
So first of all, I'm just going to go out and say it. This is, so in this sort of theoretical setting, first of all, it's sort of, is she playing like...
She's playing like...
Football's a dangerous sport.
Yeah, she's playing like the way that boys play football. She's not playing like flag football or touch football. She's like, I want to play football.
And she's playing
for my high
is
school
this co-ed
team.
football, or is this a girls' league?
Let's say... Either way, honestly. But let's say it's co-ed. She's like, I want to play for my high school team. And I go to a pretty progressive high school.
Do this.
Yeah, where like half the team is girls and half the team is boys.
Yeah, no one's actually asked me that.
Interesting.
That's a good question. Yeah, I would let her, not until she's in high school. And I would not encourage her to do it.
Would you try to discourage her? Or maybe I should say educate her about the risks.
Yeah, no, I would certainly want her to be aware of the risks, but I definitely wouldn't encourage her, and I wouldn't tell her no, but she has to be in high school.
Yeah.
I mean, so I've been asked this question a lot, sort of if you had a son.
Yeah.
And my answer for if I have a son is the same answer I just told you. But, I had to think about, does having a daughter...
Does that change things?
Yeah. Does it change things?
Yeah, because there's also a lot of other, obviously, considerations there.
Yeah, there's a lot of other considerations where I'm like, yeah, it's just... There are a lot of considerations. Like, what is, there's a lot of serious considerations that, like, are associated with... First of all, I have to imagine it just has to be difficult.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where I think the resiliency that comes from it could be really, really good for psychosocial development throughout the lifespan. But at the same time, you see it probably in your department. And that's to say nothing about MIT. I have no idea what the landscape is like there. But if it's anything like the rest of the world, there aren't that many women studying mathematics at the highest levels. And there aren't as many, tenured faculty that are women. And they're, it's something we deal with being women. I mean, this is a little bit of an aside, but it's something I did want to get to with you, which is what I always hate doing, because I hate being asked this question when people go, what's it like to be a woman scientist? And I'm like, I'm a scientist and I'm a woman. I'm not a woman scientist. Like, what is that? It's like a new category of science. But towing that line between, yes, it is important to talk about gender equity in the sciences, and yes, it is important to talk about being a Latina woman who is getting a PhD. Obviously, it's important to have that conversation about being a Black man getting a PhD in mathematics, where like you are representative of the tiniest fraction of PhDs in mathematics. And it's, first of all, it's not okay that that's the case. But second of all, it's so important that kids see you in that role, because it's the only way that they'll know that they could potentially do that too. Because if they don't see people who look like them and who talk like them and who come from the same places that they come from, they will never see it as a viable option for them.
No, absolutely. And this is something I think about. And okay, I mean, one thing I want to stress is I don't have all the answers. I like far from have all the answers. And so I go back and forth about like how I should handle this because well, let me tell you why. And I even there was a book that the American Mathematics Society, joint with the Mathematical Association of America, put out, which was a collection of essays, sort of about stories of struggles and resilience, sort of in math. And this is actually I wrote an essay for them, and this is actually what I talked about. And I struggle with the fact that first of all, I can say with confidence that I've never, ever, like once in my life, felt like in some mathematical setting that I was being judged because of the color of my skin, or that I was thought of as lesser than, or any of those things. But first of all, my mother went to great lengths to make sure that I never felt like that. She went to great lengths when I was sort of a child to make sure that I always felt like, whatever I wanted to do, whatever I wanted to be, like I wouldn't be held back by the color of my skin or the household I was born into. And I can say that like my mother succeeded. I really don't feel like being Black has had a single effect on my sort of mathematics career trajectory, whether or not that's actually true. But I can say that my like experience I've come to learn is not the typical one. And the typical one, at least from what I've experienced anecdotally, talking to sort of like other African-American mathematicians, in particular, talking to sort of young African-American would-be mathematicians at MIT, they often have feelings of inadequacy. They often feel like, first of all, they're the only Black person in all their classes, in all their higher level math classes. And of all the other kids, they're the one that's behind. Maybe because, they didn't learn as much math as all the other kids did when they were in high school. All these other kids were doing like international math competitions and learned all these different like things about math when they were much younger. And, so some of the kids, might ask one of them, like, how do you not know this? Or, things to that effect. And it makes them feel like they don't belong. And it makes them feel like, they can't do this. And I have to admit, like, it's just tough. And I sort of feel for them. And in many ways, I feel bad that, like, that was not my experience at all. But that's certainly an experience people have. And I don't know how much of it is sort of the culture that we have in math, like in the college and graduate level, and how much of it is things that are really deep-seated and deep-rooted and sort of like issues that occur to young people before they ever step onto a college campus.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me think, I think it's pretty clear that it's not specific to math. It's somewhat worse in math and computer engineering, computer science, I think, and physics. Yeah. I think in terms of the gender parity and also the ethnic diversity. But I think this issue is fundamental to ethnocentric monoculturalism, right? The dominant culture in America is a white male culture. And so that's the privileged culture. And that's the default culture. So anything that's not that is the Black version or the woman version or the whatever, because people go to a place of white men being the default. It's just, there's obviously a lot to unpack there. I've been talking about these issues a little bit more and more on my show. I had the opportunity to interview some really really brilliant minds who come from very diverse backgrounds. And so I'm always fascinated to hear about their individual experiences, because it's true, it's individual. Like I've talked to people who said, I went to a historically Black college because I wanted to have that kind of support and fostering of these things. And I didn't want to have to experience some of the difficulties that I felt in a university where I was like in the minor minority. Which, I mean, it's so amazing that those opportunities exist. But it's also obviously says a lot about our culture. I've also talked to people who really struggled with the idea of kind of tokenism, like, oh, we want to have a Black mathematician on a panel, we're going to call John because he's the one that we know, right? And then you end up being like the representative of the entire field. And that's really shit and totally unfair too.
Yeah, no, it's I mean, I have to say, this is going to sound strange, but sometimes I feel like, first of all, there are so few Black mathematicians. So there's even so few to the point that I feel like, I don't even know what I'm saying, but I feel like there aren't even like, I feel like math researchers don't have biases against Black mathematicians, really, because there's not enough of
so
us
interesting.
for them to like, it's not even like a thing that, this is going to sound so strange, but there's just like actually so few.
I don't think that sounds strange. You know what's funny is that, like, because I feel like I had the same experience growing up in the suburbs of Dallas, where I had two Jewish friends. I've had this conversation with my friends now because I live in LA. Like, most of my friends are Jewish living in LA, and I lived in New York for a while. But in Dallas, I had like two Jewish friends. I went to one bar mitzvah, and one of my friends today is like, oh my gosh, is there so much anti-Semitism there? And I'm like, no, like I didn't ever hear anything anti-Semitic where I was growing up, because people weren't, like, there weren't enough Jewish people around for them to know anything about Jewish people. Like, you know, there were no stereotypes.
Yes.
It was so, and I'm sure there are pockets where there was, of course, but like, I'm like, no, I never heard a single anti-Semitic word where I was growing up. It was so strange. Yeah. So I think I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah. And so like in many ways, okay, first of all, I always want to say, like, I love the mathematics community, and it's really like, it's been amazing to me, but I feel like, okay, if the mathematics community struggles with anything, I think it struggles a lot more with how they sort of interact with female mathematicians than, let's say, African-American mathematicians.
Because it's a little bit more measurable, the actual kind of discrimination that's happening.
Yeah, is sort of my personal feeling.
Yeah, I mean, it's an issue, right? We know that this is an issue. We know basically that we need to see more diverse opinions in the room, because that's how we get to the most creative answers to problems. You know, it's like, I feel like I'm a little bit of a broken record because we talk about this so much on the show. But yeah, like it's an issue. And it's an issue whether we're talking about ethnic diversity, whether we're talking about SES. That's something we don't often talk about. Poverty. People coming from positions of poverty, they're obviously going to have a completely different worldview than people who come from a position of financial privilege. You know, immigrants, women, trans individuals, you know, gender fluidity, gender non-conforming individuals. So yes, a diversity of voices, and you know, we can cut that into the historical issues, right? Like reading Beverly Tatum, where are all the Black kids sitting together in the cafeteria? Obviously, there are different issues for African Americans who, you know, have families who lived through Jim Crow and slavery and things like that. Then, you know, myself as a Latin woman, my historical background is completely different. But the representation problem is still a problem across the board.
Yeah, and I also think that you know, I don't know how to feel exactly about the representation problem. In the following sense. So first of all, MIT does not have an African American math professor.
Yeah, interesting.
Most top places don't. I don't know that they have a responsibility to have one. If that makes sense. I mean, so, okay, first of all, it's not like MIT is saying, hey, we just don't want to hire any African American mathematicians. I don't think that's what it is. I think that they look at people's sort of mathematical accomplishments, and they sort of decide, who do we think the best mathematicians are? And I think it's just so happened that it's this situation. And sometimes I ask myself, I actually don't know if MIT math has a responsibility.
Well, it's really whose responsibility is it, right? Because ultimately, you can't hire black mathematicians if there are no black mathematicians. And so why are there no black mathematicians?
Yeah.
That's the question, right? So is it a function of a societal push? Is it a function of, at the lowest levels of education, primary school all the way up? And I don't know. It's like, whose responsibility is it really? All of ours. So yes, I think in that sense, it is MIT's responsible, but no more than it's the state of Massachusetts' responsibility and the federal government's responsibility.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's systemic, right?
But,
it's institutional and it's systemic.
Yeah, exactly. And also MIT, okay, I'm using African American because this is what we've been talking about, but if MIT did have an African American professor, a tenured African American professor, this would be huge for for mathematics, I would say, in the same way that it's, but at the same time, it's,
Well, in the same way that what you're doing is huge. It really is. And I know that probably you can't think about it like that all the time because it's too much pressure. And you're doing this because you care, because you're interested in math, right? So you are getting a PhD in math. You were interested in math before you ever became a football player. But ultimately, there is a downstream effect from the work that you do. And it is an important thing that you are in many ways trailblazing. I mean, it's sad to say that in 2019, but you're trailblazing.
Yeah. It's something that I never thought about when I was, an undergrad studying math. But once I got to the league and my profile sort of increased, it's something that I sort of became just very aware of. And so first of all, for whatever reason, it's not just the African American mathematician thing, but also that I was a football player. And I get this platform. I mean, listen, I'm on this podcast with you. I'm definitely not the most deserving of this. I mean, how do we as a society decide, who we pay attention to and who we don't? I mean, there's, a lot of great mathematicians that I think the world could really benefit from knowing about, but somehow they know about me. And so I just need to do the best I can.
I think it's really cool that you mentioned other people while we were chatting and talked about their work and their books. And I think that that's a cool service that because you do have the platform, that you're in a position to be able to kind of elevate other people. But you also, there's the poster of you on the kid's wall, and that's a big deal. It's a really big deal. And it can inspire when a kid goes oh yeah, maybe I want to play football. I've always loved football, but maybe I also want to care about school. I think we're living in a society now where being smart, or I should even say just being academically inclined, is frowned upon by certain segments of the population, which is a huge bummer. And I want to see a cultural shift away from that. I do. I don't feel guilty saying that I think it's important that we make kids excited about education again. And that being being educated is a good goal to have.
Yeah, you should sort of this is one thing that, I always harp on people about. Okay, this is going to sound crazy, even in well-educated circles, innumeracy and sort of pride in innumeracy drives me absolutely
when
crazy.
People are I'm too dumb to understand that.
Even
oh God.
Even hearing it from people who, because I know Louisa, I've had the chance to sort of be around a lot of famous and brilliant writers and brilliant sort of literary types. But even hearing sort of innumeracy jokes from some of them, it just bothers me. No one jokes
You're
about
right.
being illiterate.
Yeah, because the social cultural context of that would be shameful. It would be embarrassing. You wouldn't do that to somebody.
Could you imagine someone joking about being unable to read?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Being unable to
somehow
read
it's a point of pride to not be able to calculate the tip on your bill. You're right. That's so strange. And you're right. It's not something we should celebrate. It really frustrates me when I see, the more extreme examples are like the t-shirt that's for sale in some shop in the mall that says, I'm too pretty to do math. And it's like, oh, it makes me shudder. It's just disgusting. But you're right. That's just an extreme example of somebody who's in a position of like media influence joking about how math is hard and it sucks and it's stupid. And my kid comes home to do his math homework and I can't even help him. And thank goodness I don't have to do math anymore.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's like,
exactly.
oh, what a bummer. So, okay. We're running low on time. I always close my podcast with the same 2 questions. But before we dive into them, I know we started to mention CTE and I know it's a really big topic, but I've read a lot about how CTE influenced some of the decision making in terms of your career trajectory. But I've also read a lot about how your mathematical career has influenced your NFL career trajectory. And so, I mean, you're a mathematician. I know that like you probably can't put like some sort of economics like value on it, but how much of these different variables really helped shape your decision to retire when you did, to go back to school when you did, all that jazz?
Yeah, I can, first of all, I can say with certainty that this sort of, this question of CTE or sort of concussions never really sort of became a thing that I even really thought about too much
Yeah.
until I was in the
So
league.
like when you were in high school, college, you
Like
didn't
my whole
really.
time playing high school, playing college. I mean, first of all, I have to say, I absolutely loved playing football in high school.
Yeah.
I really like it was a really enjoyable thing for me as a young sort of like rambunctious kid who had a lot of aggression. It was like it was a great outlet for me. It was a great sort of place where I made a lot of friends actually, because the high school I went to, I didn't go to, I mean, it didn't have a middle school. So actually football was a way that I sort of like made friends before school even started, as strange as that sounds.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was this thing that had this like real appeal to me. And the reason I got into football is because, well, my dad played football.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when I was a kid, like I would, my dad lived in Canada, and, I would see him like every, second weekend or third weekend or something. And I would be in his office, and, sometimes he would be working, and I would see in his office, there was this like framed photo of him like in his football pads, like running or something.
Yeah.
And I remember it just had such an impact on me. And like when I was a kid, I wanted to be just like my dad. And so I wanted to play football. And this is why I started playing football. It was completely because of my dad. And like it was something where like this is gonna sound crazy. And if you have the book, you'll read about it. Like it's something where like this is something my dad and I seriously bonded over. Like, okay, this is so first of all, like by modern day standards, this is going to sound like crazy. And I would, first of all, I would not do this with my son, but like, but at the same time, I really enjoyed it. And I wanted to do it. When I was in high school, my dad bought us football pads.
Okay.
So he bought a helmet and shoulder pads for me and helmet and shoulder pads for him. And we would like do drills in like empty fields in Canada, like do football drills.
Yeah.
And he would like hit me, and let me tell you, when the first time we started doing it, like he just put his helmet right under my chin and just knocked me right over. And just like, and I was shocked. Like the first time it happened, he got right under me and he put me right on my back, and I was like in absolute shock. And like really, my father, he's the person who taught me how to be a good football player. Like he's the one who, because he did that to me. I was like, well, how'd you do that? And yeah, I mean, he's the main reason that I ended up even being in the NFL. But yeah, it's just I don't know, it's such a strange thing to look back on.
No, but I don't think.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm
I don't
rambling,
think that's an
but I just have
uncommon experience.
yeah, I don't know. Yeah, and I'm telling you, I had so many amazing experiences playing football in college. I mean, it was this strange feeling that I've never felt in any other sort of aspect of my life, where it's me and it's my best friends and we do everything together. We eat lunch together, we watch film together, we practice together, we hang out at night together, we go to parties together, and like we play together on Saturdays, like representing our university. And it was, I don't know, it's just such a really special time. And all my, like, the majority of my best friends in the world are just these same guys I played with. And now it's wedding season, and so every year it's like it's all the same people, all the same characters, except okay, this time this guy's the best man. And it's sort of like all the sort of people I'm closest with, like that I have a closeness with, that is really hard to replicate with anyone else. It really comes from college football.
And so it wasn't even a thought in your mind that some of these kids are going to get very, very sick when they get older.
Yeah, no, it's the sort of thing where, okay, at the time, I mean, okay, I'm aware that yes, there were dangers with playing football, but like I loved playing football so much that I was aware that there were these sort of risks. And playing, okay, in high school, I don't think I was, as strange as this sounds, in high school, I don't think I was aware of it.
Well, I don't think it had really blown up yet. I mean, you're young, but still, the book by the two brothers that was like the big Frontline documentary, it hadn't, I mean, it wasn't quite on everybody's mind yet.
Yeah, no. So in high school, I wasn't even aware of it. In college, I think this started to become a thing. Okay, I had never heard of CTE, but just, I mean, common sense dictates that football's a dangerous sport.
Yeah. I mean, maybe you didn't know
And
the
so,
downstream intense brain injury, but like, your body is getting beat to shit.
yeah, I know my body's getting beat up, and then, yeah, and it's one of those things where, yeah, I was aware of this, but I just really loved playing football.
Yeah.
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 And yeah, it's yeah, it's interesting looking back on. I mean, also, I really enjoyed my time playing in the NFL, although I'll say I definitely enjoyed college football much more.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Well, there's
But
probably a lot less pressure, right?
yeah, it's less pressure. And also, guys are so much closer. In the NFL, you're competing with people for, to feed your family. Guys change teams a lot.
Oh, right. You could
There's
have
sort
a
of
best friend who you're playing against the very next season.
yeah, so there's not so much, like, the rivalries in pro football are sort of like much less pronounced, I believe, because you have friends on the opposing team and you might end up being on the opposing team, next year. And I don't know, teams like pro teams, they don't really have that much allegiance to their players. As opposed to in college, you're somewhere for college, you're going to be there for 4 years and you're going to be on this team, and you might be competing with someone for a spot, but whoever gets the spot, like, everyone else doesn't just get cut and have to go home. Like, everyone else is still on the team.
Yeah. And your hometown heroes, depending on the type of place. Like I grew up in the suburbs of Dallas. Like Friday Night Lights was my life. You know what I mean? I was a high school cheerleader. Like that was what you did on Friday nights. And there is that like deep kind of passionate hometown pride. But yeah, in the NFL, I mean, it's a business.
Yeah, no, it's just different. I mean, it's, first of all, it's great in many ways. I mean, there's something great about, playing a sport for a long time and being able to, finally play it at the highest level. And also there's something nice about, making money, but, there are downsides to it too. I mean, I would say that of all the three sort of like levels I played at, college was certainly my favorite.
So, like, not for nothing and not to divulge too much, but I have a dear, dear friend whose partner was diagnosed with CTE, and she's going through the difficulty of, they've actually separated because he's become quite violent, and there's been a lot of just a lot of loss, a lot of pain, a lot of, the dementia setting in, and the kind of the worst things that happen when somebody has, and I don't think we ever fully defined it, but chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which is this post-concussive syndrome that has all these outcomes that there's a million documentaries about it, and they're amazing. You should watch them. But it's hearing about it firsthand instead of just seeing like the data is like it's heartbreaking, because there's confusion, there's anger, there's, like I said, violence. That's an actual symptom.
So can I level with you for a second?
I would love that.
I haven't seen a single documentary. I haven't talked to a single person who's been diagnosed with CTE. I haven't talked to a single person who's been a loved one of someone with CTE.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that, so just so you know, my level of like awareness of like the sort of documentary scene around this, I haven't seen a single thing, actually.
Well, and I assume that people are just as interested in the same things that I am as I am. And then I'm like, of course you've heard all about this. And it's like, no, I seek out the frontline documentaries and I watch all the stuff that comes out because I'm like weirdly interested in it. So yes, maybe most people listening don't know anything about CTE, but it's rough, right? Like you may have heard the news stories about ex-NFL players who have committed suicide.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I've heard about this.
That's where the information comes from, that in the last, weeks, months, whatever, that there was like confusion, paranoia, sometimes some like domestic violence. And these things are legitimate symptoms, not for everybody. Not every case looks like this, but there is a real risk around CTE of and interesting things like infidelity that never would have been an issue.
Where
all
what?
of a sudden, because there's personality changes that come along with it. So kind of like if you've ever heard about the story of Phineas Gage, the railroad worker who got the railroad spike through his brain and basically had a frontal lobe injury. It's an old kind of neuroscience tale that is often told. It was one of the first ways that we realized that brain damage can cause personality change.
Wait, are you going to tell me the story?
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, that's basically the story. He was he had a railroad tamp, which are these long spikes, and he was tamping it down, and they set them with dynamite, and one of them exploded and went through his cheek and out through through the front of his head. Mm-hmm. They're great. You can read great books. They're children's books about it now because he's such a classic, neuropsychology tale that you can go see his skull on display and the actual railroad spike that went through his head. But he survived, and he survived for several years. But he became basically a different person. He had a total personality change. He started gambling and drinking and cursing and womanizing, and everybody's like, "Who is this guy?" We never knew. This is a whole new Phineas. Mm-hmm. And it's not that happens to everybody with CTE, but there are extreme cases where people become a totally different person. It's one of those, it's like dementia in a way. It's like Alzheimer's in a way. It changes the core things about a person that you often define, the self is somehow threatened in certain cases, the identity. And that can become really painful for the parents, right? Because often this happens to NFL players when they're still a little young, so they might still have their parents. It can affect their children, their partners. It's a scary, scary thing. And it's good that people are starting to become more aware of it. But you're right. I don't think most people really know the risk, the actual risk. Did it inform your decision to stop playing football?
It's something I definitely thought about. I mean, of course, this is something you need to you need to think about this when you're sort of, when you're thinking about these types of decisions. Actually, the main thing that really influenced my decision, I mean, okay, yeah, of course, I'm ramping up with math. At the time, I was playing in the NFL while working on my PhD at MIT.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing coursework in the fall via correspondence.
Yeah.
Which, first of all, was just killing me. It was actually too much. It was actually too much. And first of all, I wasn't looking forward to doing another year of doing those two things together.
Did you have your partner yet? Were you guys did you have that support, or were you also kind of single?
No, I had my partner.
That's good.
I met my partner after my first year in the league.
Mm-hmm.
And in many ways, she's been a really, I shouldn't say in many ways. In every way, she's been a really great influence on me.
Yeah, she may be listening right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she really, I mean, my first year in the league, I was a little, I was still young, I was still a little wild. And after meeting
Gotcha.
her, I
Yeah.
really calmed down. And I actually changed as a person in like many ways. I was just a much
Was she
calmer
afraid of
person.
CTE? Did she talk to you about it much?
No,
Mhm.
we don't talk about it really. Yeah. I think that's mainly because
Mhm.
of me, not because of her. But no, we
Interesting.
don't really
And so
talk
you
about it.
haven't you're still quite young, you're 28. So is it safe to assume that you have friends that you made while you were in the league that you're still close to?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, well, okay, not nearly as close to as like guys from college, but yeah.
But even college, I mean, we now know this affects even young kids. So in some
Yeah, I
ways
mean,
it might
okay,
be
guys
worse
in
for
college, I
you.
mean, okay, some of my best friends from college, I talk to them like, okay, my best friend I talk to, multiple times a week.
Yeah. And so you're quite young, and it may be that these issues aren't yet showing up. Like my friend whose partner is starting to show pretty severe signs, like he's in his 50s. He played when he was young. And so those are uh, obviously legitimate concerns. And I don't know, I guess it'll be interesting to see what it's like. And I do hope that there are more mainstream documentaries about these issues. And again, this is not a football issue either. This is a boxing issue. It's a soccer issue. It's a pretty much any contact sport issue.
Yeah, no, it's, yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know what to say about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that I think is it's worth reading about. It's worth learning about for anybody listening. Maybe you're inspiring me to maybe interview a neurologist who studies this, or like a
Hmm.
neuroscientist who specializes in this, because I think it could be a really interesting chat. Now I feel like it's like a bummer. No, I want to like talk about something good before. Well, you know what? I think my closing questions actually they close in a
Hmm.
really positive way. So maybe this is a good time to make
Okay.
that kind of transition. By the way, I could talk to you for
Okay.
literally hours, and thank you for putting up with me because this has been such a fascinating conversation.
No, no
So,
worries.
okay, John, I always close my podcast by asking my guests the same two questions, and they're sort of big picture questions. So, the first one might be a little bit of a bummer, but the second one always turns it around. So, the first question is when you think about the future, right, in whatever context is relevant to you. So, it could be, your own career, it could be your family, it could be bigger picture stuff, American society, global society, the heat death of the universe. Number one, what is the thing that keeps you up the most at night? Like the actual thing that you find yourself worried about, maybe even a little pessimistic, maybe even cynical about, the thing that actually does keep you up at night. But then on the flip side of that, the second question would be, what are you genuinely and honestly and truthfully excited and optimistic for?
Yeah. Well, I think they're the same thing. So the thing that like, okay, the thing that actually like keeps me up at night and terrifies me, and actually has terrified me the majority of my
Hmm.
life, is the fear that I am not going to be a good enough of a father.
And that terrified you before you ever had kids?
Yeah, that terrified me before I had kids.
Interesting.
Like, of not being a good father. This is probably the thing that keeps me up at night.
Do you think that this is a common experience for men?
I don't know. I don't know. Okay, I mean, okay, this wasn't something that like concerned me when I was like, you know, 13, but even before I had kids, this is something that, is, oh, and I can hear
I
my
know,
little
me
one
too.
just
It's so
woke up.
sweet.
This is something that's, concerned me for, before I even had kids. This concerned me when I got to the age where it was possible for me to like feasibly have a child,
But but
I
isn't
should
it
say.
funny that, coming from a psychology perspective, because I've seen this before with clients and, in the literature and things like that, that like probably one of the first things that I would say if a client was like, I'm really anxious and I'm really, it really does I almost obsess over the fact that I'm not a good parent and blah, blah, blah. It's like right there is like good evidence to me that you are a good parent. bad parents don't think about whether or not they're bad parents.
Yeah. I mean,
Good parents
I'm
obsess about it.
trying to do the best I
Yeah.
can, and I'm trying to, I'm trying to do right by my daughter. And I guess the thing I'm most sort of looking forward to or most optimistic about is really, I'm just really looking forward to, like, spending time with my daughter, raising my daughter, just seeing what happens. Like, seriously, like, okay, there was a time in my life where, first of all, there was a time in my life where, like, football was like the number one thing. And then there was a time in my life where, like, math was like the number one thing, but football was a close second. And now, really, just like my daughter is the number one thing, and math is sort of like somewhere far down
I
below my
love
daughter.
that. Oh, we're gonna save this little piece of audio, put it in a little box for her. It's gonna be digital then because there's no physical audio anymore, so that she can hear it when she's older and cry her little eyes out. Her daddy was so sweet. John, this has been such a fascinating, informative, hilarious, super interesting chat. I'm so grateful that you were able to find time out of your busy schedule to chat with me on the show.
No, absolutely. I mean, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Guys, the book is Mind and Matter, A Life in Math and Football, by John and Louisa. Is it pronounced Louisa or Louisa?
Oh, we say Louisa.
Louisa. Gotcha. My middle name is Louise. So she says it the similar way to me, but with an E at the end. Yes, thank you, everybody who's listening right now. Thank you for coming back week after week. I'm really looking forward to the next time we all get together to talk nerdy.